Hey, my name is Scott Lydon and you're watching Swifty. In this video, I'm going to talk about Swift compiler's requirements for declaring the type of a closure. Basically, you have to tell the Swift compiler certain details about the type of the closure that you are using. Let's create a closure and assign it to a name. Okay, so let's call this closure. Alright, and it'll print hello or hi. It's very complex calculations. It's going to need a lot of time for this kind of heavy lifting. Oh, there we go. Alright, so let's, instead of creating the closure that way, let's create it like this. My closure, we're defining a function, and all it does is it prints hi. And so I'm going to call it the exact same way. Again, this is very complex. Oh, boom. Okay, so it prints hi. So as you can see, when you declare a function, you're really creating a closure, and you're giving it a name, and when you call it, it's just the same as if you're using an unnamed closure expression and assigning it to a name, and then calling it by that name. Now let's take a look at the anatomy here of this closure. Here we're giving the type, which is takes nothing and then returns nothing. This arrow is used to delineate what is being returned. And let's say we want, instead of it having it so simple, taking nothing and returning nothing, let's say it takes a couple parameters. So let's say it takes thing and other thing in. So in is the keyword to delineate that it takes in two parameters. And you see that it's throwing an error because this takes in no parameters doesn't match taking in two parameters. The other issue is we didn't tell it the type of thing and we didn't tell it the type of other thing. So if we want to, we can print thing, and then as you can see it's the error type because we haven't given it a type yet, but pretty soon we'll be able to give it a type. So we'll give it a string and string. Actually, let's give the other thing int just to keep things interesting, and also to show you that you can have different types here. And the thing, this thing maps to this type, the first type, and then the second parameter, internal parameter name, maps to the second type. And it returns nothing, so we don't have to worry about that now. And now it's having an issue with how we're calling it because we should be listing a string and an integer when we call it. And as you can see, it provides that for us. The external name is absent. We don't have to do this kind of thing where we put the external name colon and then give the actual string because of how that syntax is set up. So then we just list 10 and then it's going to say hi cat 10. All right. Now how about return types? Let's say we want to return an integer. All right, well we just write return and then we return the integer. Or we could do other thing. Integers are passed by value, so it makes a copy. There isn't an issue here. Another a little kind of syntactical optimization is we don't have to include these parentheses. Now, let's say we didn't want to give, let's say we didn't want to declare the type out there. There is a way that we can overcome this error that's being thrown. And the error is being thrown because it doesn't know what type thing and other thing is. So all we have to do is we could just wrap it in parentheses and then give it a colon, string, and then this one will be given int. And we also have to map the return type, which is, int. Boom, okay. And this will run. So you have a couple choices. One of them is if you don't want to declare it here, you can declare the types of the parameters in the return just before the in. And if you do declare it right after the name, then Swift compiler figures out that when you list thing, it's a string, and then it also figures out that when you list other thing, it maps to int. So it's very clever. Now there's a cool thing you could do where if your closure doesn't take parameters, then you don't have to list them and you don't have to include the keyword in. Now let's say you had a really simple closure. Let's say all it did was one thing, or it could be on one line. If that's the case, then you don't need to declare the type. And because it knows that nothing else is happening and whatever is on this line must be the return, therefore, you can take out return. And you have a closure that takes nothing, returns nothing, or excuse me, and you have a closure that takes nothing and returns 10. That's all that the closure does. So we can print this closure and it's going to print 10.